They called her too weak for G-forces, but when 10 enemy bombers threatened LA, rookie pilot Jax had one chance to prove them wrong. The fate of the city rested on her wings. Lieutenant Jessica Jax Turner adjusted the straps of her flight helmet as she stepped into the locker room, her heart pounding in her chest. The soft hum of the bass echoed in the background, but it felt like everything was amplified when you were the youngest pilot in the squadron. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, a quiet determination in her eyes, despite the self-doubt gnawing at her. She tugged at the sleeves of her flight suit, trying to shake the weight of the teasing she had endured for weeks. Jax had always been the quiet one, the rookie in the back of the line. The other pilots, especially the senior ones, made sure she knew it. They'd make jokes about her size, her weight, and, most painfully, her ability to withstand the G-forces during combat maneuvers. "That's our rookie, folks," senior pilot Tom Griffith said one afternoon as Jax struggled to maintain control during a training flight. "Bet she'll lose her lunch the second we pull GS. You sure you're not gonna pass out on us, Jax?" The others laughed, Griff's chuckle the loudest of all. It was a simple joke, but the sting of it lingered in the back of Jax's mind. Every time she faced a training exercise, it felt like everyone was waiting for her to mess up, waiting to prove they were right. Jax had tried not to show it, kept her head down, worked harder, never letting on how much it bothered her. But every taunt, every joke about her weak stomach for G-forces cut a little deeper than she was willing to admit. They weren't just calling her out for being a rookie, they were calling her weak. And worst of all, a part of her believed them. The air smelled of grease and metal as she made her way toward the ready room, still lost in thought. The muffled voices of the senior pilots echoed from the briefing area as she passed, and a few of them turned their heads to watch her. She could almost hear the unspoken judgment. "Hey, rookie, you still planning to take a spin in the simulator later?" Griff's voice rang out from the doorway. Jax paused, her hands tightening into fists. She knew this game. It was all about proving herself, always proving herself. "Maybe," Jax said, keeping her voice even, not giving them the satisfaction of seeing her react. She turned and gave Griff a brief, tight-lipped smile. "Maybe I'll actually get the G-forces to work for me this time." Griff snorted. "Good luck with that. Just don't embarrass yourself. And if you need to puke, we have a bucket ready." The others snickered, but Jax didn't flinch. She had been here before, and she wouldn't let it show that the mocking hurt. In the quiet of the simulator room, as the engines of the aircraft hummed in the background, Jax focused. "I'm going to show them I can do this," she told herself. "I'll make them eat their words." As Jax sat in the cockpit of the simulator, the weight of her determination settled over her like a shield. Today would be different. She wasn't going to back down, not this time. She could feel the pressure building, but she knew the next training exercise would be the real test. It was time to prove herself. The glow of the simulator screen bathed Jax's face in a soft blue light as she tightened her grip on the controls. The aircraft's artificial hum echoed in her ears, the sound of the simulated jet matching the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Her breath was steady, but the knot in her stomach tightened every time she imagined the real-life G-forces she'd face when she finally got in the cockpit of a real jet. "All right, let's see if you can handle the GS this time, rookie," she muttered to herself, speaking to the empty room. The chatter from earlier that day, the mockery, the doubts, still rang in her head. "Jax, you sure you can handle this? G-forces might knock you out cold. Just don't embarrass yourself, all right? Or you'll end up on the news for all the wrong reasons." She clenched her jaw, pushing the memory down. She wasn't here to be their joke. She was here to prove them wrong. With a deep breath, Jax engaged the throttle, watching the simulated plane shoot down the runway. The horizon stretched out ahead, the sky clear, the terrain beneath her as smooth as glass. She felt the plane's acceleration, and though it was all a simulation, her body reacted as though it was real. She had to make this count. The moment she pulled the G-force maneuver, the force pressed against her chest, flattening her body into the seat. The familiar pull of weightlessness that made her stomach lurch was still there, but this time, she pushed back. Her vision blurred, the familiar grayness closing in on the edges of her sight, but she fought it off. Her breaths came faster now, a rhythm she forced herself into. She focused on the controls, hands stiff but steady, willing her body to stay calm, to not let the pressure overwhelm her. Don't let it take you down. Another sharp turn, and her stomach lurched again, her heart pounding. Sweat slicked her palms as she gripped the controls harder. The G-forces intensified, but this time, she was ready. Her body wanted to give in, to lose the battle to the forces pushing against her, but she fought harder. Her breath was shallow, her mouth dry, but she was focused. This was her moment. No one would laugh at her again. Not after this. Come on, Jax, she whispered through gritted teeth. You've got this. Finally, she leveled out, the G-forces easing off as she brought the jet back into a steady glide. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The screen in front of her flashed. Mission success. Her hands trembled from the effort, but there was no mistaking the feeling that washed over her pride. She had done it. Jax leaned back in the seat, staring at the simulation results. She was exhausted, her body drenched in sweat, but she'd proven something to herself. The doubt that had clung to her earlier had evaporated. Her confidence was still fragile, but it was there, building. As Jax removed her helmet and stood up from the simulator, she felt the familiar weight of the pressure lifting, but only slightly. She knew the real test was still ahead, far from the controlled environment of the simulator. But for now, she had proven one thing: she could handle the heat. And she wasn't going to stop pushing herself until everyone else knew it too. Jax had just finished her debriefing, her eyes tired from hours of training, when the loudspeaker crackled to life. The voice of Captain Davis filled the room, deep and serious. All personnel, report to the briefing room. Immediate action required. We have a situation. The urgency in his voice sent a jolt through Jax's chest. She exchanged looks with the other pilots, who were already heading toward the door. She tried to stay calm, but her pulse quickened. Something was off. In the briefing room, the tension was palpable. The senior pilots were already seated, their faces set in grim lines. Jax slipped into an empty seat, feeling the weight of their eyes on her. She tried to focus, but the soft murmur of whispered voices made her stomach turn. She couldn't help but feel the weight of their expectations, or the lack of faith they had in her. All right, listen up, Captain Davis started, his tone sharp. We've just received intel on a bombing threat. 10 enemy bombers are heading straight for Los Angeles. ETA is 30 minutes. The room went silent. Jax's heart raced. Los Angeles. The thought of the city under threat, people she knew in danger, made the ground beneath her feel unsteady. We need to stop them, and we need to stop them now, Davis continued. All available jets are in use, and the backup squadron is on a training exercise. That leaves us with only one option. Jax's stomach sank as she looked up at the captain, his eyes scanning the room. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the chair. He wasn't looking at her, at least not yet. We're sending in Lieutenant Turner. Jax's breath caught in her throat. She could feel every set of eyes in the room shift toward her. Her palms began to sweat as her mind raced. The rookie. The one everyone had joked about. The one who had barely passed the G-force tests. You've got one shot at this, Turner, Davis said, his voice cool but serious. This is a high-risk mission, and you need to make every second count. You're on your own. The rest of the squadron will be tied up. Understood. Understood, sir, Jax replied, trying to keep her voice steady. But inside, she felt a wave of panic hit her. She wasn't ready for this. She had barely made it through the simulations without collapsing under the pressure. Could she really take on an entire squadron of bombers? Captain Davis didn't give her a chance to second-guess herself. Get to your jet. McCall will be your co-pilot. The city's counting on you. Jax nodded, though every part of her wanted to turn and run. As the others filed out of the room, McCall, her seasoned co-pilot, pulled her aside. You ready, rookie? He asked, a small grin tugging at his lips, but his eyes were serious. Doesn't feel like it, Jax muttered, swallowing hard. What if I fail? You won't, McCall said, his voice firm. Just remember what you learned. Trust yourself. You've got this. She didn't feel like she had it, but she had no choice. Her hands were already shaking as she made her way to the jet. As Jax climbed into the cockpit and buckled herself in, the weight of the mission pressed down on her. The hum of the jet's engines began to fill the cockpit, and the countdown started. This wasn't a simulation. This was real. And for better or worse, she was the only one standing between Los Angeles and disaster. Jax sat in the cockpit, her hands gripping the controls so tightly that her knuckles were white. The hum of the engines was the only sound in the cabin, but it did little to calm her nerves. The base had long since disappeared from her view, and now all she could see were the endless stretches of sky ahead. She tried to steady her breathing, but her chest felt tight, like a vice was squeezing her ribcage. "All right, McCall, we've got this," she muttered to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, we do," McCall's voice crackled through the intercom. His tone was light, but there was an edge to it that showed he knew the stakes. "You've been through worse, Jax. Just another day in the skies." She nodded, though she wasn't sure she believed him. The reality of the situation was sinking in with every passing second. 10 enemy bombers were on their way to Los Angeles, and she was the only one available to stop them. The other pilots were tied up, and Jax was their last hope. Her heart pounded in her chest as she ran through the checklist for takeoff. The numbers on the display blurred as her mind raced. What if I can't handle it? What if I freeze up? What if I mess up and people die because of it? "Focus, Jax," she muttered to herself. "You've trained for this. You can do this." But even as she said the words, the doubt crept back in, wrapping around her like a cold fog. She had barely survived the G-forces in training. Could she really go up against bombers? Could she make a difference? McCall seemed to sense her hesitation. "Hey," he said, his voice gentler this time. "Remember what you told me back at the simulator? You said you were going to prove them wrong. You're already doing it." She forced a smile, but it felt thin. "Yeah, but that was just a simulator. This is real." McCall didn't respond right away, but when he did, his voice was calm and steady. "Real or not, you've got the skills. You've got the focus. You've got what it takes to stop those bombers. Don't let the fear control you." Jax took a deep breath, trying to push the doubt away. It was hard, too hard. She wanted to believe McCall, wanted to believe in herself, but the weight of the situation felt crushing. She looked at the radar, and the enemy bombers were getting closer. "Just keep your head in the game," McCall continued. "Remember your training. You've got this, Jax. All the way." Her fingers twitched on the controls as the sound of the engines filled her ears, and the rumble beneath her feet grew louder. She was moving, the jet speeding up, racing toward the target. Her stomach did a flip as she realized just how close the bombers were. Time was running out, and her nerves were threatening to get the best of her. "Okay, time to put it all together," Jax whispered, steeling herself. No turning back now. As the jet soared higher into the sky, Jax's grip on the controls tightened. The countdown was on, and she could hear the distant sounds of the bombers in the air. It was no longer just about proving herself. It was about saving Los Angeles. Her heart raced, but there was a flicker of determination in her eyes. The real test was about to begin. Jax's knuckles were stiff against the flight controls, the leather of her gloves creaking as she tightened her grip. The sound of her breath felt loud in her ears, almost drowning out the rhythmic hum of the engines. She'd been chasing the enemy bombers for what felt like an eternity. They were closing in fast on LA, and every second counted. "McCall," Jax said, her voice tight, "Are we close enough?" "Almost there," McCall replied, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency. "Radar shows all 10 bombers still on course. If we don't stop them now, we'll be too late." Jax's heart slammed against her ribs. The city, her city, was depending on her, but every instinct screamed at her to turn back. The air felt thick, suffocating even. She looked at the heads-up display, and the bomber formation loomed large. No turning back now, she thought. With a quick glance at McCall, she pushed the throttle forward, the jet surging forward like a beast unleashed. The G-forces hit her chest hard, and for a moment, the world tilted. Her vision blurred, and her breath caught. It was everything she'd trained for, but the pressure was unbearable. "Focus, Jax. You've got this. Come on, come on, she muttered under her breath, fighting the panic creeping in. Stay on target, Jax, McCall said. Eyes on the prize. We take these guys out, and it's over. We save LA. The words were like a lifeline, and she gripped it, forcing herself to push past the fear. The bombers were now directly in her sights. 10 massive silhouettes cutting through the sky, their engines roaring like distant thunder. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't let it show. This was it. She had to pull the trigger. She had to stop them before they could reach the city. Target locked, she muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. She adjusted the controls, lining up the perfect angle. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she squeezed the trigger, sending a stream of ammunition toward the lead bomber. The shot was true, and the first bomber exploded in a fiery burst, its pieces scattered across the sky. But there were still 9 more to go. Got one, she yelled, relief flooding her for a split second before the next wave of bombers came into view. They weren't slowing down. Don't get cocky, McCall warned, his voice cutting through her brief moment of victory. You've got 9 more to take out. The pressure mounted. She could hear the rush of wind, the deafening roar of the jet, but all she could focus on was the next bomber. She wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Jax banked the plane hard to the left, narrowly dodging the fire from one of the bomber's tail guns. The wind howled, the jet rocked, and for a moment, she thought she might lose control. But she fought it. She had to fight it. The city was only miles away. The clock was ticking. Another bomber flew into her sights. Jax pulled back on the controls and squeezed the trigger again. Another explosion. But there were still 7 left. 7 more chances to get it wrong. 7 more bombs that could destroy everything. Come on, she whispered, come on, come on. The seconds felt like hours as she lined up her next shot. Sweat trickled down her face, but she didn't wipe it away. She couldn't afford to. The moment of truth was here, and she wasn't backing down. As the last of the bombers went down in flames, Jax's heart raced in her chest, but there was no time to relax. The battle was far from over, and the last bomber was the hardest yet. The real test was still ahead of her. Jax's hands were slick with sweat as the G-forces pressed harder against her chest. Every breath felt like she was trying to inhale through a straw, her lungs fighting to expand under the weight. Her vision blurred at the edges as she pushed the throttle forward, banking the jet sharply to avoid the incoming barrage of enemy fire. The roar of the engines was deafening, but her mind was focused on one thing: survival. McCall, I've got 2 more on my tail. Jax shouted, her voice tight, breathless. The pressure in her head was becoming unbearable, her body straining under the force. I see them, McCall replied quickly, his voice steady but edged with tension. Pull out, Jax, brake left now. Jax's fingers twitched on the controls, but it took everything in her to force her body to respond. The G-forces were relentless, pressing her deeper into the seat, her vision narrowing with each second. She could feel her pulse in her throat, the blood rushing in her ears, drowning out all other sounds. It was like the world was closing in, and for a moment, she thought she might pass out. Stay conscious. Stay focused. With every ounce of strength she had left, Jax twisted the controls, pulling the jet into a hard left turn. The pressure in her chest intensified as the world tilted, the horizon spinning wildly in her peripheral vision. Don't black out, she repeated in her head like a mantra. Her heart pounded, but it wasn't just fear. It was exhaustion. She could feel her muscles screaming in protest, her body fighting against the forces pulling at her, begging her to stop. But stopping wasn't an option. Almost there, Jax. You've got this, McCall encouraged from the intercom, his voice cutting through the fog of her thoughts. Just keep it steady. But Jax wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it steady. The G-forces were pushing her to the edge, her vision narrowing further, the blackness creeping in at the edges. She gritted her teeth and clenched her jaw, focusing on the readouts in front of her. One more turn. One more shot. The last bomber was in her sights. The enemy plane was descending rapidly toward the city, and she had no choice but to take the shot now. Her hands shook as she reached for the trigger, the pressure so intense that it felt like her chest would collapse in on itself. "Jax, don't," McCall began, but Jax wasn't listening anymore. She pulled the trigger, the sound of the guns firing almost lost in the roar of the engines. The world around her exploded in a burst of fire as the bomber disintegrated in the sky, but Jax didn't feel the rush of triumph. All she felt was the crushing weight of the G-forces and the dizzying vertigo threatening to overwhelm her. For a moment, everything went black. When Jax came to, the world was spinning. She could hear McCall's frantic voice in her ear, but everything felt distant. Slowly, she blinked, fighting against the nausea that surged through her. "I did it. I took it down." But as she fought to steady her breath, she knew that the battle was far from over. Jax's heart hammered in her chest as she studied the jet, the sky around her now eerily quiet. She had taken down several bombers, but the adrenaline hadn't eased. There was still one bomber left, still one chance to get it wrong. "McCall, where the hell is that last one?" Jax barked, eyes scanning the horizon. "Right below you, Jax." "I see it," McCall replied quickly, his voice tight. "It's closing in fast. You've got to take it out now." Jax's grip tightened on the controls. She glanced down at the radar. A blinking red dot confirmed what McCall said. The last bomber was in her sights, but just as she lined up the shot, a sharp beep cut through the cockpit. Her stomach dropped. "Missile lock," McCall shouted. "Evade now." Jax's pulse spiked. She could feel her breath catch in her throat. The missile was locked onto her plane, the deadly countdown already ticking down in her head. Her heart raced. She wasn't just facing the bomber now, she was facing certain death if she didn't act fast. "Think, Jax. Think." Her hands shook as she pulled the stick back, rolling the jet into a sharp, violent barrel roll. The G-forces hit her again, but there was no time to worry about that. The missile warning continued to wail in her ear, and she could feel the heat of the missile on her tail. Come on," she muttered through gritted teeth. "Just stay on target, just stay on target." McCall's voice was a distant sound now, drowned out by the deafening ring in her ears. She could feel the missile behind her like an invisible hand reaching for her, following her every movement. "Jax, you have to brake now." McCall yelled again, his voice edged with panic. "It's too close. You need to." She didn't need to hear him finish. Jax wrenched the controls to the left, forcing the plane into another hard turn. The missile's lock wavered, just for a moment, but it was enough. She pulled the jet hard to the right, cutting through the sky, twisting it like a snake trying to escape. The missile locked again, but she was too fast. She could hear the missile's engine scream, desperately trying to catch her. "Come on, please," Jax muttered, barely able to keep it together. The sound of the missile was growing louder, and her hands were drenched in sweat. Another twist. Another hard roll. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, the missile's pursuit faltering as Jax slammed the plane into a steep dive. She cut the throttle, letting gravity take over, and the missile overshot her, barely missing the tail of the jet. The missile's whine faded, the danger gone in an instant. Jax's breath came in ragged gasps, her chest heaving as if she'd run a marathon. She could hear McCall's voice in her ear again, this time with a note of relief. "Holy shit, Jax. You did it. You just outran a missile." Jax swallowed hard, trying to push the fear back down. "Yeah," she said hoarsely, "but I'm not out of the woods yet." She glanced down at her radar again. The bomber was still there, still coming straight at her. She couldn't afford to be distracted, not now. Jax took a deep breath, hands still trembling, and set her focus back on the last bomber. The near miss with the missile had rattled her, but there was no time for self-doubt now. The final shot was coming, and she wasn't going to let anything stop her. The clock was ticking. Jax's hands were still shaking, but she couldn't afford to dwell on it. She had narrowly dodged the missile, but there was still work to do. The final bomber was coming in fast, and every second mattered. The radar pinged in her ear, a reminder of how close she was to failure. She could feel the weight of the mission settling deeper into her chest. "McCall, I'm lining up the shot," Jax said, her voice steadier than she felt. She focused on the bomber below, its dark silhouette growing larger in her sights. The bomber was unaware of her approach, but she knew that wouldn't last. She had seconds, maybe less, to take it down before it could drop its payload. "Roger that, Jax. You're in range. Just take your time, but don't wait too long," McCall said, his voice calm but laced with urgency. He knew the gravity of the situation. He trusted her, but it didn't feel like enough. "I need to do this for everyone," Jax thought, gripping the controls harder. She pulled the jet into a steep dive, lining up her crosshairs with the bomber's tail. The world tilted around her as the G-forces pressed her down into her seat again. Her vision blurred at the edges, but she ignored it. This was the moment. She had to hold steady. "Almost there," Jax whispered to herself, her finger hovering over the trigger. The bomber was in perfect alignment now, its engines roaring as it barreled toward the city. Every instinct screamed at her to act, to finish this before it was too late. The seconds stretched, each one longer than the last. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe. In, out. Stay calm. Focus. "Come on, Jax," McCall urged from the intercom. "You've got it. Don't hesitate. Don't hesitate." The words echoed in her mind like a mantra. Jax's hand steadied on the trigger, and in one fluid motion, she squeezed. The sound of the guns firing was drowned out by the roar of the engines as the jet surged upward, the recoil sharp and immediate. The bomber flinched in the air, its engine sputtering before it exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Pieces of debris scattered in all directions as the bomber tumbled from the sky. Jax didn't watch the explosion. She didn't need to. She already knew it was done. She pulled the jet back into a smooth climb, feeling the weight of the world slowly lift from her shoulders. "Target destroyed," McCall said, his voice tinged with awe. Jax's hands trembled on the controls, but a flood of relief washed over her. It was over. She had done it. She had taken down the last bomber, saved Los Angeles, and proven herself to everyone who had doubted her. But the battle wasn't quite over. There were still moments left before they could finally call it a victory. "Let's get back to base," Jax said quietly, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of what she'd just done. "Roger that," McCall replied. "You did good, rookie. Real good." Jax gave a small nod, a tight smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She wasn't a rookie anymore. Not in her eyes. As the jet made its way back to base, Jax allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The pressure, the fear, and the self-doubt had all melted away, replaced with something else, something stronger. The mission was over, but this victory felt like the first step of many more to come. The jet touched down on the runway with a smooth thud, the wheels skimming against the tarmac as Jax guided it to the hangar. The familiar hum of the engine slowly died down, but the deafening roar of adrenaline in her ears didn't. She exhaled sharply, still gripping the controls like they were the only thing holding her together. The moment the jet came to a stop, a wave of exhaustion washed over her physical, mental, and emotional. Her heart was still racing, her hands still shaking, and the silence in the cockpit felt strangely empty after the chaos of the mission. The world outside her window seemed to move in slow motion. The ground crew started to rush toward the jet, but Jax barely noticed. Her mind was still stuck in the moment, replaying the near miss with the missile, the pressure of the last bomber, the explosion that had ended it all. She unbuckled herself from the seat with shaky fingers and slowly climbed out of the cockpit. Her legs felt unsteady as she hit the ground, like she might collapse at any moment. Her entire body felt like it had been run through a blender. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not yet. "Jax." McCall's voice broke through her daze as he jogged over to her. His grin was wide, but there was a soft admiration in his eyes that made Jax hesitate for a moment. "You did it," McCall said, clapping her on the back with enough force to nearly knock her off balance. "You're a goddamn hero, rookie." She didn't know how to respond. The words didn't feel like they belonged to her. Hero? She was just doing her job. She was just trying not to die. Her gaze shifted to the ground, her fingers rubbing the back of her neck in exhaustion. Yeah, well, I couldn't have done it without you, Jax replied softly, her voice hoarse. You kept me focused out there. McCall shrugged, the grin never leaving his face. I just helped you along the way. You handled the rest. She nodded, but her mind was still elsewhere. The flashes of the bombers, the missile, the pressure, it was all still fresh. And even though she had succeeded, a small part of her felt the weight of the aftermath. Hey, Jax, a voice called from behind her. She turned to see Captain Davis approaching, his expression unreadable. Jax's stomach tightened. She had been expecting this, but it didn't make it any easier. Good work out there, Davis said. His words were brief, but they were genuine. You saved the city today. Don't forget that. She didn't know how to reply. The words didn't feel big enough to match what had just happened, what she had just done. Thank you, Sir, Jax said, her voice barely above a whisper. You earned that, Davis said with a nod before walking off to oversee the post-mission debrief. The weight of his approval hung in the air for a moment before he disappeared into the crowd. Jax stood there for a moment, watching the others move around her, congratulating each other. She was proud, there was no denying that, but there was also a strange emptiness inside her. This mission had been a test of her ability, of her courage, and for the first time, she hadn't just survived, it felt like she had proven her place here. As the buzz of celebration continued around her, Jax couldn't help but feel a gnawing sense of loneliness. It wasn't just about the mission anymore, it was about what came next. There was no time to celebrate, there was always another challenge, another battle. But for now, she allowed herself a small smile. She had done it. She had truly done it. The hangar was quieter now, the chaos of the mission beginning to settle into a dull hum of activity as the jets were cleaned, prepped, and prepared for the next day. The adrenaline that had powered Jax through the mission had faded, but the sense of accomplishment still lingered, like the final notes of a song. Jax leaned against the side of her jet, watching the ground crew move around her. The weight of the mission had lifted, but there was something else, a sense of peace, as if she had finally come into her own. She wasn't just the rookie anymore. She was part of something bigger, something real. Hey, rookie! Jax turned to see McCall walking toward her, a broad grin plastered across his face. His eyes were gleaming with that familiar mix of admiration and pride. Don't call me rookie anymore, Jax said with a smirk. She met his gaze, and for the first time, the words didn't feel strange. She wasn't the rookie anymore. McCall stopped in his tracks, feigning surprise. What? Not rookie, he teased. You're still young, you know. Jax chuckled, shaking her head. I'm still learning, but I'm no longer the one everyone doubts. McCall raised an eyebrow. Fair point. You've earned it today, Jax. He clapped her on the shoulder again, harder this time. I'm proud of you. I knew you had it in you. She felt the warmth of his words, but there was a deeper satisfaction that came from something far more personal. She wasn't just proud of herself for the mission. She was proud of how far she'd come, from the endless mockery to standing here, with a team that respected her. I couldn't have done it without you, Jax said, her voice steady, but genuine. You kept me grounded. McCall grinned, but his tone softened. You kept us grounded. You led that mission, Jax. Don't sell yourself short. Just then, Captain Davis approached, his eyes scanning the hangar before settling on Jax. She straightened, but he just gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. Jax, I wanted to thank you again for today, he said, his voice more relaxed than before. The city's safe, and it's because of you. Jax's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't flinch. She looked him directly in the eye. Thank you, sir. It was an honor. Davis nodded, clearly pleased with her response. No, Jax. The honor was ours. You've earned your place here. The respect is yours. As Davis walked away, Jax felt something inside her shift. The weight of his words settled into her chest, heavy but comforting. The constant doubt, the uncertainty that had clouded her every move, was gone. It had been replaced by something stronger. Respect. Confidence. Her place in this world. Jax took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like forever. She glanced at McCall, who was still watching her, his grin now softened into something more like admiration. You know, Jack said, glancing down at her boots, I think I'm starting to like this identity. McCall chuckled, his voice low and serious now. You should like it. You've earned it, Jax. The real deal. She smiled, feeling the truth of those words settle deep into her bones. The rookie was gone. In her place stood a pilot. A respected pilot. And that was something worth holding on to. As Jax watched the hangar come back to life, her heart felt light, her chest full of quiet pride. The past was behind her now. It was time to look ahead to whatever came next. She wasn't the girl who had doubted herself anymore. She was Jax Turner, and nothing could take that away. If you enjoyed Jax's journey from rookie to respected pilot, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Stay tuned for more thrilling stories. Your next favorite adventure is just one click away.